All right, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette, and I am interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from the UK, I have something different for you today. I have Sarah Weiler, and it's not her that's so different, it's what she does is what's so different. So Sarah, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You are running a company called the Power of Uke, and on your website it says you teach 21st century skills like empathy, growth mindset, creativity, and dealing with uncertainty through the ukulele. So we're gonna dive into this. It's very different for my listeners, the usual ones that are listening. But let's start with the first question, which is always the same. What does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Yeah, so I have a few different spaces in the house. So I live with 3 other people. There's 4 of us, and we're all working from home at the moment, doing lots of different freelancery things. So we have our living room, which is for kind of private calls and like workshops and webinars, things like today. And then we've kind of turned the kitchen into a co-working, so that's a bit busier. What do I need though? I need the space really to like have the privacy, but also the busyness as well. And I love at the moment that I can just go and make a cup of tea, go and walk around the park and have that flexibility. But yeah, I like having also lots of, because I'm a musician, having instruments near me, and I will sometimes just take a 5-minute break and play the piano or play the ukulele, and it's great to have that all in your house. So I think in some ways I've really enjoyed the remote working that's been enforced.
Right, with other people. But what I like is that you're taking breaks and doing something like, playing music or doing something breaks. What's happening, or what I'm seeing a lot of people doing right now, is they're taking breaks and they're staying on their phones or checking email or doing something still related to a screen. And so what I like about this is you're doing something in 3D with sound and sort of motion as well. So I can imagine you feel a lot more refreshed afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it is always tempting for the phone to be the break. And I think that's something that I've really, during lockdown, the first lockdown we had in the UK, I started a thing called Tech Free Thursday, where I did it for about 7 weeks. I turned off my phone and my computer, and I had an out of office that just said, on Thursday, I focused on my creative projects. And I just, gave myself that day to be totally in flow with whatever I needed to do. And, sometimes I did do work, but it was all like written work, or, it was kind of, it was more creative, or like in my journal. But a lot of the time it was, making music, cooking. And it was so powerful to go back the next day and feel that refreshed. But what I noticed is, whereas usually I'd have been clicking the whole way through my day, checking emails, being on my phone, I got through all of my WhatsApps and my emails in about 5 minutes. You know what I mean? It's like you have this constant interruption during the day usually, but when I had the day off and then the Friday I'd open my phone, actually it really didn't take that long when it was all in one go. And it made me realize just how much of a distraction it is when it's this constant coming in.
Wow. I am really relating to that, because you're right. It's like, if you open your email, you might as well just sit there and watch messages come in.
Yeah.
It's like boxes just fill. It's too easy to send emails.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. So, so you felt more refreshed after these tech-free Thursdays, you felt more refreshed to go back to work, and then more creative. And then do you just take the weekend off, or what is your schedule like?
Yeah. So I tend to like on my calendar protect Mondays, just so that I don't rush into the week with loads of calls booked up. I mean, I'm a coach as well, so people will book in calls, and I tend to take Mondays as I do work, but I kind of ease into the week. Yeah, and I tend to take weekends as well to not work. But I think because I used to be a school teacher, which was incredibly rigid in terms of the schedule, and I really love now that I can be a bit more flexible. And my best time of day of working really is, sorry, my housemate's just come in with some melon for me, which is really sweet.
Hey, over here. That's awesome.
So I was just like, don't come in, I'm recording a podcast. Oh no, I get melon. So this is the kind of setup we have in our house, like looking after each other with melon and tea. But what was I saying about, I can't remember now. What was
It was tech-free Thursdays and then
Oh,
the
weekends
refreshment and weekends, correct?
Yeah, no, I was going to say that because I used to have such a rigid schedule, I now love the fact that, yeah, my kind of most productive time of day is between like 4 and 8 p.m. So I often just allow myself to have like a relaxed morning, kind of take a walk or just have that chill in the morning and then work at a time that suits me. And sometimes that will be on a Sunday. I think I just allowing it to be as it needs to be, because I don't think it's not like from 9 till 5 on a weekday, we just happen to be more productive. I think it's like allowing that to be a bit more intuitive, but at the same time, putting the boundaries in place, because I think I usually don't work on a weekend. And
Right.
even though a weekend doesn't really mean anything when you're self-employed,
Right.
it's good to have some structure just to be like, and also the rest of the world takes weekends. So it makes sense.
Makes it easier. Yeah, indeed. But I was going to ask, I was actually going to ask, like, how do you keep yourself from being always on? So you've put these boundaries. It sounds like you put these boundaries in place for yourself. Like if you're so inspired to work on the weekends, you can allow yourself to work on the weekends. But it sounds like you were taking good care. You're taking Mondays for yourself to sort of get into it. Tech-free Thursdays. I think I've got to start adapting that. I can't imagine that. You can't imagine the tech I've got to.
Yeah.
But yeah. Did you go through withdrawals when you first tried it?
No, honestly, because it was so clear, it was instantly amazing. And I even have to show you this. I mean, you won't be able to see, but me and my housemate made a box for our phones to go in, which is a phone retreat. You can't really see, but they basically this is so sad, but you put the phones in little pouches. And because I was like, the phones needs a break from me. It's not that I need a break from the phone. The phone is working overtime for me the whole time. And somehow when it was about giving the phone a break, it felt a lot easier. So I had this real ritual on a Wednesday night of putting the phone in the pouch, saying, thank you for working so hard for me, phone. We're both going to have a day. I mean, this is going to sound really crazy, but this is how I have to train my mind to do these things.
Well, here's the thing. When I tell people about becoming a successful remote worker, I always say you have to experiment and think about what is it that works for you. It doesn't matter if it's rational, and most of the time it's not rational or doesn't make sense to anybody else. But if it works for you, then great. So I think it's really inspiring to hear stories like this, because I think it gives other people permission to be a little bit more playful in terms of how we think about it. Because when we think about, when I think about boundaries, I always think of like strict things. Maybe it's because I grew up in a military family, so it's always like rules, but this sounds way more fun than like putting rules in place for yourself.
Yeah. But the thing about having withdrawal, I think it's really interesting. Like I thought it was going to be really hard, but because it was like on a Thursday, you don't use it. And I it was on all my contacts and clients knew that. People started to remember. I got texts on a Friday that would say, I know it's a Thursday and you won't be checking your phone. So people started to get to know it. Other people started adopting their own versions. And in there, it was kind of like, it was actually quite exciting. Like I didn't feel the withdrawal, also because in the space of using tech, there was so much creativity. Like I read entire books in a day because I hadn't got my phone. It was almost scary how much was there waiting to come out creatively because I wasn't using tech. And why do I not do that every day? Well, obviously there are people to speak to and things like that, but I really recommend it if you have the capacity, even if it's just like a tech-free hour or a tech-free whatever it is, but just like see what's there in that space. It's so amazing.
Yeah, it is. I went on vacation, vacation. We went 4 days to another house, not that far away from here, because with COVID, you can't really travel. But what I just happened to look at how much I use my apps on the phone while we were on vacation, and it's crazy to admit this. I spent 2 hours a day on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I kept telling people, I don't have time. And then I'm spending 2 hours a day on Twitter. Crazy. So I just cut that. Cut that in the.
At the same time, if Twitter is giving you something nourishing, like that's where a lot of people get their news, it might be connections you're making. Like I would say that 2 hours on Twitter isn't necessarily a bad thing if it is serving a purpose. But I suppose there's a difference between 2 hours of mindless scrolling and 2 hours of like making connections, building your network. I don't know. It depends how you're using those 2 hours.
Good reminder, actually. Good reminder, because it's not all bad. I was using it to follow politics. It was not productive time.
Okay.
It was just total time wasted. And I feel way better now that I'm not thinking about it anymore. Okay, but let's dive into the actual
Yeah.
subject of why I've invited you here today, because it's so
Mm,
awesome and I'm super excited. You run a company called The Power of Uke, where
yeah.
you are teaching life skills through the ukulele.
Yeah.
Now, how did this start and why the ukulele?
Yeah. I mean, it started almost by accident. And the ukulele, I mean, I've played music for years. I picked up the ukulele in about 2011 when I was traveling. By the way, this is a ukulele if you're watching and you don't know what it is. It's like a little guitar. And it became like this signature thing that I had with me everywhere I went. I just loved the fact that I could carry it around and play music wherever I was, whereas a piano, a little bit more difficult. But I just always had this ukulele with me, and I would sing and play with people. And I worked in Austria for a year, and I worked for an educational startup. And while I was there, I started writing songs with the company and like getting all the staff together to play. And it was this just amazing experiment that I didn't even realize was an experiment. But when I looked back, I was like, wow, that was what we were doing. That wasn't actually our job. It was just something I kind of added to the culture. Was really powerful and really transformative in terms of connecting everyone, in terms of just light relief. So Power of Uke started really as a team building thing. So I was like, oh, I'll go to some companies and teach the ukulele and we'll have some fun. But over time, the feedback I was getting was, whoa, I am learning so much about my colleagues through this. So I was teaching people the ukulele from scratch, and they were having insights into how that colleague was dealing with uncertainty, how they were dealing with like not being good enough. Sometimes it was very revealing. Sometimes it was just seeing a totally different side of their character. It was like, whoa, I didn't know that they could be that fun or playful. So I was seeing that by offering people this instrument and just being with them for a few hours, it was just bringing so much. It was like removing the mask. And so then it was reverse engineering. Okay, well, what could I intentionally set up through these workshops to reveal? And some of that is around, how do we deal with not being good enough? How do we deal with learning a new skill? How do we what actually can we achieve in a short space of time if people believe in us? And so I take people on this journey through the workshop of knowing nothing to writing and performing a song with their colleagues. And that whole thing is on 3 hours. So, at the start of the workshop, they're too scared to even stand up and go play one strum. And by the end, they're blasting out music. And the whole point is to share, like, well, where is that relevant to your work? Like, where are there moments where you think this is not going to work? And actually, the whole remote working is a real example of that, of people giving people a new tool and saying, well, you've got to do it, you've just got to work it out. And actually we have adapted, but there's a lot of fear at the beginning. So that's the aim, really, that you give. It's this meta experience of playing music together, having this gorgeous, really like nourishing musical creative experience, but at the same time having real insight into how they're showing up in other parts of their life. Because I'm like, it's not about the music, it's about what
Right.
this is. How we show up in this workshop is how we're showing up in meetings. It's how we're showing up anytime someone gives us something that feels uncomfortable. And so you really do, you have that, it's an opportunity really to have that insight and self-reflection of, and to get skills through the music that you can then use in your work.
I love it. I love it. And does it work? Does it work across the board in terms of types of companies that you've tried this at?
Yeah.
Is it sort of a human thing that comes out, so it's like, it doesn't matter if you're a banker or a teacher or
So yeah, I've worked with a huge range of companies. I actually feel it works best in companies where that it is very unusual for them to do this type of activity. So, for example, I've gone to places like Innocent where they're always doing this kind of stuff, and they enjoyed it, but I don't think it was like, whoa. Whereas I worked with like Allied Irish Bank, and I worked with, Ernst & Young and PwC, and it's like, what are we doing? And it's so antithetical to their culture. It's so different that I love seeing that shift, because it's just so removed from their day to day that, like, yeah, I just see that shift. But yeah, I think it
Sure.
works with all like it is a human thing, but I think it works really well in companies where they don't usually let go and have and are silly, or don't really have permission to be playful in that way, because it's such an opportunity to work in a different way.
I can imagine that it takes a concept into the abstract in a lot of
Mm,
ways. And that abstraction sort of helps people free. It frees people because it's
yeah,
not your usual topic.
yeah.
No one in the room is an expert except you. So there's no competitiveness. It's
No,
all, it
it's
kind
a
of,
leveler. It's a leveler.
yeah. And the ukulele is a playful and silly. It's like a
Yeah,
goofy instrument in many ways. There's something just silly about it. So
yeah.
it makes it, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I don't know.
No, totally. And even at the beginning where I say to people, right, go and pick which color you want. And then someone's like, I want the pink one, I want the red one. And suddenly they're like 4 years old, getting really excited about their toy. And I think that's the thing. It's like, I always talk about, I invite people to be 4-year-olds again in this workshop. It's just, I get people to sit on the floor like they used to at assembly. And it's just, you see people relax and loosen. And I think there's often a misconception that in those moments you're not being professional, or you're not able to learn, or it's somehow like not real work. But you always just see that from that place of peace, or like relaxation, all of these insights are coming out. People are making those connections. People are able to connect better. And I said to them once, I said, how is it sitting on the floor? And one person went, well, it's like being at school before we had any inhibitions. And I was like, do you sit on the floor in your meetings with clients? And they laughed. And I was like, but seriously though, if sitting on the floor gives you the feeling of not having inhibitions, like, why do we have tables? Like, take them away. And it's these seem so obvious, but then you're like, no, I can't do that. But actually, why not? Why not?
Right. It lets you question a few things that maybe you would never have questioned before. And
Yeah,
I love it. I believe in playfulness. It's a big part of who I am and what I do. I mean, my branding, everything's bright and colorful and cheerful because I really think playfulness is a really important aspect
yeah,
of work. I miss it when I don't have it. I can't work on teams that are just super strict and like the hamster wheel. I
yeah.
just don't thrive in that situation. So I can imagine everybody's a bit like that. So one of the things that happened with COVID is everybody started adapting their classes
Mm.
to be taught online. And in our email discussions, you had written that you had thought about adapting your services, but then made the decision not to, or still in the process. So I want
Yeah.
to talk about that a bit. So why not do it remotely?
Well, I'll share the story that one of my main clients, I won't know who they are, but one of the clients I work with, I regularly run in-person ukulele workshops for them. And they were redesigning a whole program to be put online. And they said, yeah, so we want you to run the uke workshop online. And I was like, wait a minute, how's that going to work? And they were like, well, we'll just send everyone ukuleles. And I was like, okay. And I had my reservations, but I was also like, let's try it. So I redesigned the workshop. We sent everyone pre-work. People were playing from home, and then we gathered. And one of the limitations on Zoom is that there is a delay. So if you're playing music together, it just doesn't allow for that. It doesn't allow for simultaneous music making. And I suppose what was really amazing about this workshop is that it didn't really go very well, but it made me realize just how powerful the in-person music making is. What did go well is that people had fun, and they were like creating they wrote a song, and they were really silly. All of the silliness was there. But that experience of being in a room and playing together,
Yeah.
it's just unparalleled. And I hadn't really realized before, like there is a magic. There's a magic when we create together in the same space. There's a magic when we dance together, when we sing together, when we're watching a play in person. All of this that we cannot imitate online. And actually, what's been amazing is it's really helped me see, well, if we can't, I don't want to try and recreate, but what can we do? And actually, where's there an opportunity online? And so one of the things that has been working is songwriting, but without the ukulele. So I've done it for a few times now, where people have shared lyrics using Jamboard, and we've kind of brainstormed lyrics and then like co-created a song, which then everyone can sing at home but muted. But that people still have the experience. It's not quite the same, but it's good enough in terms of satisfying. But yeah, it was a really interesting one, because part of me was doubtful about whether we could translate it online, but then I also wanted to have a growth mindset, and I was like, let's try it, because, I don't want to be like, in fact, I don't want to just like, well, that's just not going to work, because that's kind of the attitude that I teach us against, right? Like, I want people, when they say it's not going to work, to be playful and experimental. So I took that on. But equally, I mean, it was interesting. My housemate said to me, she's like, you know what? Music has won here, because it won't be, it's not going to translate online. It's not going to be that simple. And it's like music as a kind of, as a like an entity is saying, no, you have to do this in person. This is not this cannot be digitalized in this way. I'm not saying music can't be online, but the experience of making music together, I think it is most powerful in person, because of actually the vibration you're getting from singing and from the music as well.
Of course. And actually, it brings up a really good point, in that not everything translates well online. And one of the big mistakes that I've seen companies make is that they've tried to take what they do in the office and then just mimic that 100% online, not realizing it's a different medium. It's a different space, and we can't translate everything. So there are some things that are just going to have to be different, and we need to experiment with that. And some things are just not going to work. So it's okay to pivot and say, that's not going to work. We won't go that direction. Let's try, this. And then there's the in-between, where it's good enough, it's satisfying. At the moment, we're in a pandemic, so there's not a lot of choice. So we've got to do what we can with what we have. So there's that whole component. But I think it's just a good reminder. Not everything translates well, nor should it. It's a different medium. So,
but and actually, by trying to translate things online and seeing where it falls short, can help you see why it's working in person. So I wrote a blog about this the other day, actually, that like the frustrations that we're feeling about why things aren't working in COVID is actually helping us see our why, and helping us see why things are working normally. Do you know what I mean? So it actually noticing that absence of like, oh, we can't get people to connect in that way, is saying we usually get people to connect in this way. It's actually helping you see the power of what you're doing.
Right. And appreciating it too.
Appreciating it, yeah.
Yeah, boy, I'm going to have serious gratitude when I can hang out with people in 3D
I know,
again. Oh man, it's going to be a party when this is over. I just know it. It's just going to be like the next golden age. It's going to be awesome. So there was another reason. So, and I know that this podcast in particular is not so focused on remote. But there was another reason that I was very intrigued with your background, and that is I watched your TEDx talk. TEDx, is it Newnham? Am I pronouncing it?
Newnham, yeah.
Newnham. And the title of it was Knowing When to Quit. And as many listeners know, or they might know, as I used to work for a happiness organization called Happy Melly, where we were dedicated to bringing happiness at work and hoping that we could just make people happier in their work. And so when I saw this TED Talk of yours about knowing when to quit, it was also to make people happier in their jobs. And so I want to dive into this whole idea of knowing when to quit. Why did this topic speak to you in particular? Let's start there.
Yeah, so I suppose I've quit a lot of things. So I'm a multi-entrepreneur, multi-passionate, multi-potentialite. I call it being a carouseller. So this idea of having lots of things that are on your carousel. So lots of different projects that might come in and out of focus. And it's, in order to be someone that, if you enjoy variety in your life, you also have to get good at quitting, because things are going to lose their interest. Things are going to lose their vibrancy. And I think my journey with quitting is I was originally a school teacher. I left that after 3 years, and then was on a real journey of self-discovery. I started a lot of projects and then was also developing myself at the time. And I had to let a lot of them go, but it was very painful at the beginning. And it still is, to be honest. I still find quitting hard, because I think there's a sense, I think for me, and I think a lot of people would agree with this, there's a default setting of you should try and make stuff work, really. Like you should try and carry stuff on. And if you can't, then it's a failure, and it's a bit of a shame. And that was the feedback I got. So with my first startup, I worked on it really hard for about 18 months, maybe 2 years. And then I just had this moment where I was like, I just know I don't want to work on this anymore. And I thought of every possible way to hand it over, take it on, have it running in the background. And the only thing that felt totally aligned was to let it go. But the feedback I got from people was that it was a real shame and a real disappointment, and what, oh, that's so sad. And what I've realized now is we need to celebrate when people are in alignment. When people say no to something that's not serving them, they are saying yes to themselves. And we focus so much on the thing that we're letting go of, because we cannot deal with the grief that someone is going through. If someone says, I don't want to do this anymore, and I've stopped, it holds up a mirror to the stuff that we're not stopping, that's not serving us. It's very uncomfortable. I think this is why we don't like quitting. We don't like seeing people quit, because it's very uncomfortable to see someone go, actually, no, thank you. That's not good for me anymore. Relationships, jobs, projects, house shares, all of it. So I think there's a big discomfort, but actually, really, we should be celebrating. And a lot of the work I'm now researching quitting. I find I'm starting a podcast, as I mentioned before we started filming, which is called Knowing When to Quit, because I want people to share these stories of agony and indecision, because I think it's because it's so taboo, people suffer. And actually, indecision about whether to quit is the unraveling, and it's we're changing shape in ourselves. So as we transform from one identity to another, it will feel uncomfortable, but yet we feel like that's a problem, or we feel like shouldn't talk about it because I've said I love this job and now I don't. And I'm like, I don't know. I just think we're not equipped yet to manage quitting. So it's something my theory is people have to push themselves. They wait until burnout, because then it's almost like a passive quitting. Then the thing quits them. Because do you see what I mean?
No choice anymore. The body sort of says it's like a forced quit.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
That's we're not going any further. So what are the signs? What were the signs for you? And maybe if you've explored this with other people, what do you see the signs are, like knowing when to quit? I mean,
Well, one of the things that I've created since my TEDx is this thing called the quitting quadrant, which I have to share a link of, but it's a model which helps you check in with how you're feeling when you want to quit. And so whenever we're looking at any activity, we're looking at the level of interest we have in it and the level of discomfort. And I won't go into loads of it now, but it will create these different states that you go into, but then they also turn into unhealthy states. And so the unhealthy states that I've identified as being when we're going to quit are plateau, burnout, resentment, and apathy. So, sometimes it's moments of, it's that kind of rising of energy and I just can't take this anymore. And sometimes it's that lack of stimulation and boredom that means that we're kind of drifting off and need something new. And when you're in those outside states, when you're in those kind of unhealthy states, you can do things to shift that. It's not the end. But I think, again, we're not really equipped of knowing. So I'd say the first thing to ask is, well, first of all, identify that you're not feeling good. Like wanting to quit usually doesn't mean you should quit, but it means something in your current state isn't right. Because when we're happy, we don't think we want to quit, right? Like you don't spend like
elsewhere.
And you don't spend you're not on your second week of holiday going like, oh, maybe I should go home if you're having a good time. So I think first of all, honor the part of you that's saying, wanting to quit is a part of you saying, hey, something's not right, something's out of alignment. It's it's a gift really from your subconscious. And then the second thing is to identify, is this real? And also maybe to wait. So I once saw a great talk where this girl was like, every time you feel like you want to quit, you have to every day, if you don't feel like you want to quit, then you have to start counting again. And it's only if you count 14 days in a row that you can take it seriously. So I think that's another thing. I really like that. So give yourself a time frame. So identify that there's something in you that's unhappy and be curious about it, but don't act on it yet. Maybe you say, look, I'm going to check in a month, or I'm going to check in a week. And then you just see, and if there's a pattern where, to be honest, it keeps coming back, then you can really identify, okay, what do I need here? And I think at that point, seeing that quitting is neutral. It isn't at the moment, but I'd love people to see it as neutral. So, it is neither good nor bad whether you're quitting. It's just the decision. It's whatever's going to make you feel more aligned in the present moment.
Right. Brilliant. Man, I could go on and on. Unfortunately, we're running out
I
of time.
know.
This is crazy. Oh, but I think that there's so much value, remote or not. These are really great concepts in which to take into our lives and to come more into alignment. And I think right now is a really good time for people to just sort of evaluate and reevaluate, like, what is going on in our lives right now. I mean, COVID has sort of changed everything. And we're like, there's no certainty right now. And for the foreseeable future, we're going to be sitting in a bit of uncomfortable, uncertainty, and it is always uncomfortable. So it's really good to reflect. I would love to end this if you are willing, and would love to do that. I would love to end this with a song on your ukulele if you're willing to do that.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I'm just not sure how good the sound will come out.
If it's terrible, we'll just exclude it.
All right. Okay. What should I play? I could do the song about tax returns. And for people who have to do a tax return.
Awesome.
Start again. All the things I do to avoid my tax return. All the things I do to avoid my tax return. All the things I do to avoid my tax return. All the things I do to avoid my tax return. I went for a run to avoid my tax return. Had lunch out with my mum to avoid my tax return. Drank a bottle of rum just to avoid my tax return. And had homemade dim sum to avoid my tax return. All the things I do to avoid my tax return. All the things I do. All the things I do. I started a PhD to avoid my tax return. Moved to another country to avoid my tax return. Cut off my knee to avoid my tax return. And got rushed to A&E to avoid my tax return. I went back to sleep to avoid my tax return. Burned to my receipts to avoid my tax return. Got an Uber to Leeds to avoid my tax return. And got arrested by police to avoid my tax return. All the things I do to avoid my tax return. I got a taxi with some Texans to avoid my tax return. And somebody else's tax return to avoid my tax return. I heard a song about avoiding my tax return to avoid my tax return.
I totally love it. Totally awesome. I'm holding up my cards for the people that are listening, my super cards. Love it. So obviously, if you're thinking about doing some sort of a ukulele or a team building workshop, I would encourage people to reach out to Sarah for some fun and some playfulness and clearly some deeper insights into who we are and how we're working. Sarah, thank you so much for joining me today and for sharing your insights. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks so much for having me on. It was really lovely.
Until next time, everybody, be powerful.